In big part on the Mandela Centenary celebrations, and as part of celebrating the centenary, former United States President Barack Obama will today deliver the 16th Nelson Mandela Lecture at the Wanderers Stadium here in Johannesburg. So to honor the centennial of Madiba's birth, the lecture's theme will be renewing the Mandela legacy and promoting active citizenship in changing the world. And this will focus, of course, on creating conditions for bridging divides, for working across ideological lines, and, of course, resisting oppression and inequality. And to talk to us about this a little more, we're joined here in studio by Luzuko Koti, who's a Director of Communications at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Thanks so much for coming through.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
It's a big day.
Excitement
is. Running high.
At last, this day is here. We've been working towards this day for the past, year and a half, preparing for what would be the biggest lecture of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. That marks Madiba's birth, the 100th birthday. But also, I think more importantly, for us, as we finish one lecture, we start another. So as we finished Amina J. Muhammad last year, we started working on this lecture in terms of what it would mean to telling the story of Madiba, to basically giving South Africans an opportunity to engage on his legacy, to look back at his story, a rural boy from the Eastern Cape, from Mvezo, to being a global icon that is revered for human rights, for peace, for activism. And I think people wanted to have a moment or a period of celebrating that legacy in a way that is fitting for Madiba. And I think today marks the peak of that journey, and I think we're still going ahead because it's a centenary year, so we will engage in this centenary year for the rest of 2018 and of course going into 2019.
And Luzuko, against that backdrop, what sets this year's lecture apart?
Particularly because it is positioned right at the center of Madiba's centenary. It almost kicks off his 100th year because he was born in 1918. Importantly for us as the foundation, we wanted this year's celebrations to be anchored around Madiba's values and maybe find an opportunity to inspire a nation and of course the global community to return to the values of peace, of humanity, of reconciliation, of transparency, values that Madiba held dear. And maybe if we connect ourselves to the values of the men, we will find something in us that makes us change the way we do things, not just personally, but also in terms of how we lead. Those who are in position of leadership have to be driven by some values to do the right thing. So the decisions we see being made, sometimes we question them because they don't resonate with the kind of society we dreamed of in 1994, the society that Madiba told us we could build if we work together. So should we be a nation that returns to its values, maybe we have a chance of reviving that hope and building that kind of society that Madiba dreamed of.
And I'm hoping that you would actually have opportunity to interact on those questions that you raised, because they're very important.
Absolutely.
And there would be quite a few schools of thoughts that would converge around those questions. But we'll leave that there for the time being. I want to talk about the theme for this year's lecture, and it talks about renewing the Mandela legacy.
Yes.
That's the first part of
yes.
it, and then promoting active citizenship in a changing world. Two very strong, very important, and very powerful sentiments brought together in this one theme. But let's focus on the first one, renewing Mandela's legacy. What is the thinking behind that?
For us, this lecture was inspired by the challenge of how democracies globally have become fragile. How people have become vulnerable while they actually live in democratic societies. And we thought that this is something very interesting because we know that when you have this promise of democracy, you look forward to a different life. You look forward to a change in your circumstances, right? And you see this, that democracy actually exists in many spaces, but people's lives remain the same. They remain unchanged. And we wondered, what then is the cause of this problem? One of this, I think, is how democracies have been captured not just by economies and systems such as capitalism, but also by leaders and people. So we thought this lecture should help us engage deeper in that conversation. So when we then had a speaker like Barack Obama who could speak with the attention of the world, I think it's an opportunity for us to anchor that conversation around renewing Madiba's legacy. Because then, if you do that, you are able to say, Madiba's legacy is that which focuses largely on human rights, which focuses largely on peace and democracy. How then do we revive that as a legacy that stands on its own, which also, as we know, a highly contested legacy, but itself tells us in terms of how we could conduct ourselves today, what kind of decisions we could make today to build a different future from which we are at least facing today. So I think when we talk about Madiba's legacy and how we could renew it, we're talking about Madiba's legacy from a perspective of peace, of freedom, human rights, and of course democracy. Those are values that he held dear. But again, the second aspect of that theme, as you outline it, talks to us about building an active citizenry that begins to own its own challenges, its own problems that are confronting it in every community. So everywhere we are, we know this is a Madiba style of doing things, that let's, instead of doing things for ourselves, do things for others. Let's get involved, let's make decisions. Let's change the path of our circumstances because we are in control. And this is why when he was retiring from public life, he made a rallying call to South Africans and the young people of this country and globally to say it is now in our hands, because that is the only way you can get people to realize that they can't look around and look elsewhere for solutions when in fact they have the biggest power to change their own course.
Well, we're coming into news time right now, and this story is, of course, our lead story in the news as well. So we are continuing the conversation with Luzuko Koti, who's the communications director at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and just looking at the excitement that is growing ahead of this afternoon's Mandela Lecture at the Wanderers Stadium. And US President Barack Obama, of course, expected to deliver this lecture. But is it all systems go logistically?
It is. Nothing can change now. We are at Wanderers Stadium. Barack Obama is expected to deliver the lecture at 2 o'clock. He has arrived in South Africa. And I think the president is particularly excited to be the one delivering this lecture because you know that he himself was inspired by Madiba, and he talks fondly about his values and his leadership and how he takes from that. So we hope that everybody else will be inspired. That kind of rapid transfer of inspiration will move from him to us. But I think more importantly, every challenge that we had experienced preparing for this lecture, whether it has to do with ticketing or, making sure that everybody who wants to be there can be there, we've tried to deal with, and we had a very, very dedicated team of people who've been working day and night to make sure that it's all systems go today. So today, I think everything is set. People can make their way to Wanderers. You only need your ticket and your ID because the two must match to get into the precinct and be part of the
And just a final question. President Barack Obama, he's in the country not only for the lecture. Mm-hmm. What else will he be involved in?
He is part of, as part of his trip, he's doing a lot of engagement with young people. He's talking to young people. You know that he has his academy that focuses on leadership. And I think that ties in very well with what we do. So he's going to spend some time doing a bit of that. And of course, he's spending some time this evening at the dinner with the stakeholders of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, invited by the chairman of the foundation. So he will be addressing us there, including President Ramaphosa, because the two will probably spend the rest of the day together today. So I think it's going to be an exciting day and exciting 2 days. And I think he wanted to spend Mandela Day in South Africa doing some of the work that we all will be involved with.
Luzuko Koti, thank you so much. Communications Director at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And over to Leanne now for the rest of the news bulletin.